Please join me in welcoming our friend and partner, Indra.
Thank you, Andre, for that kind introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here in this wonderful environment. And I have to tell you, I've never read that biography. I don't know who wrote it. I have never read it, so I have no idea what it says, and whatever it says, not authorized by me. So it's great to be here in Iceland. I never thought I'd ever get here in my tenure as the head of PepsiCo, but it's wonderful to be in one of the most pristine and unpolluted countries in the world. And I know that for American youth, one of Iceland's greatest exports is the television show Lazy Town. But for those who are not too young, it's Björk. And the swan outfit, I still remember that. But I think the world is missing out on malt and appelsin, and so even though Ölgerðin is an importer, I think it's time it started to export these products. But beyond these products, there's something else one would love to bottle when you're here in Iceland, and that's the fighting Viking spirit. You know, Ölgerðin is the only company in the PepsiCo system that has launched an initiative that they call PBC. Pepsi bigger than, you know who I'm talking about, the red team. In 2000, Pepsi had a 15% market share. Today, we are nearing parity in Iceland, and Andre, as he mentioned in his talk, he will not stop until Iceland is the #1 Pepsi country in the world. In fact, I've threatened to come back when you cross, or you get parity share, Andre. In about 10 points, I'll be back. In 18 months, 24 months, I'll be there. I think, Andre, all the Ölgerðin team on notice here. The Ölgerðin team is doing a phenomenal job with great execution, offering products that consumers and customers want, and doing it with incredible trademark pride and gusto. And those are very much the traits that PepsiCo shares with Ölgerðin. With dedication and passion, we have grown the PepsiCo portfolio to include 22 brands that each generate more than $1 billion in retail sales annually. And these include much loved brands like Lay's and Quaker and Gatorade and Tropicana, and of course Pepsi. And today, consumers enjoy our products in about 200 countries around the world, and we have many more brands, getting to the $1 billion level. But today, I'm not here to talk about the company I proudly represent. I'm here to talk about something that's integral to our success, partnership. In particular, I want to talk about the partnership between PepsiCo and Ölgerðin. The nature of our relationship provides a phenomenal example of how a dedicated partner can transform a market, and how responsible corporations together can actually make a difference. Although our companies are different, we've developed some traits and a commitment to adapt to a changing environment. And I really think of this as a story of the fox and the hare. Just indulge me for a moment. Now, in a world of classical fables, the fox and the hare are common characters. But this story isn't a parable meant to impart a moral. Rather, it's a story about biology. One can find foxes and hares throughout the world. But I understand there's something different about the foxes native to Iceland and the hares found in nearby Greenland and the northernmost parts of Canada. Do you know what the difference is? It's their ears. Arctic foxes and Arctic hares both have very small ears compared to their cousins. And this is a product of adaptation. Smaller ears means less surface area, which protects against heat loss. Smaller ears keep the foxes and the hares warmer during the harsh winters. Of course, foxes and hares aren't really related, but their ears are an example of what we call convergent evolution, when two species with unrelated lineages evolve to make the same adaptation to a similar environment. Why did I tell you the story? I look at Ölgerðin and PepsiCo, and I see two companies with very different lineages that evolved in very different continents, but began to share many similarities as the environments in which we operate became more similar. As Andre just said, 100 years ago, a young man, Thomas Thomason, started a brewery that would become Ölgerðarinnar. 115 years ago, a pharmacist in North Carolina started selling a cola that would later become Pepsi Cola. Over the years, over the century, we have each transformed in dramatic ways. Pepsi has become one of the world's largest food and beverage companies. It's the largest in the United States. We have 300,000 employees, and we have products that reach consumers 1 billion times every day. And Ölgerðarinnar has become a leading, diversified manufacturing company and a determined sales and marketing organization with presence in every product category, reaching every corner of Iceland. And as the world has changed, both PepsiCo and Ölgerðarinnar have both adapted in their own ways. We have both transformed our portfolios. We have both expanded our portfolio to meet the increasing need for health and wellness and the changing preferences of our consumers. And we've both recognized the imperative of sustainability for both our businesses and for society. We've made preemptive changes to put our companies in the forefront of responsible corporate action. So it's only fitting that after years of convergent evolution, our great companies would come together eventually and become great partners. Convergent evolution, of course, is not some happy coincidence. Evolution, by its very nature, is a fight for survival. Only the species and companies that adapt and grow can thrive. And as all of you know, evolution is not an easy process. It takes a great company to see challenges ahead and have the courage to make the changes to face those crises head on. Companies that have the rare privilege of celebrating their centennial know it's just as important to think in terms of generations as it is to think in terms of quarters. And we know that to ensure our future success, to secure it for generations, it is not enough to be great companies, we have to be responsible companies. You know, recently I was asked to speak to the leadership and alumni of a prestigious American university, a business school in America. And they wanted me to answer a very critical question. What should business leaders of tomorrow be learning today? What should business leaders of tomorrow be learning today? I told them that we needed to fundamentally shift the way a corporation understands its relationship with society, because businesses have to understand that we operate with a license from society. And as we each think about our evolution, it's important that we ask ourselves, what is the role that business can and should play in a community? What responsibility does it have to our consumers? A responsible corporation, in my mind, ought to focus on creating sustained value. That really means it generates wealth for shareholders. You can't forget that. But it does not do so at the expense of society. The costs of doing business cannot and should not be passed on to our communities. Nor should these costs be deferred to future generations. Business leaders have to manage for both the short term and the long term, both the level and the duration of performance. A responsible corporation must have a deep and abiding interest in both the path immediately in front of it and the horizon to which it's headed. You know, some companies view responsibility to society purely through the lens of projects that dedicate their resources to charitable causes. And, you know, they call it strictly corporate social responsibility. And I think that's admirable and that's important. But what I'm talking about is something very different. I'm not talking about the good company that decides what to do with the profits from its business. I'm talking about the good company that worries about how it does business. Not just focused on the profits from its business and how to spend it, but really focuses on how it does business. A responsible company focuses on how it does business. And at PepsiCo, we call this philosophy performance with purpose. And it's our belief that when we transform our business to perform for consumers, protect our environment, and invest in our employees, top-tier financial results will in fact result from that. doing business in a way that aligns with the needs and expectations of society is the only way to run a business that sustains itself well into the future. It's our path to being a great company, a responsible company. Let me explain that just a bit. First of all, we recognized that to be a successful food and beverage company in this changing environment, we needed to transform our portfolio, offer a wide range of products from treats to healthy eats, but then go back and rethink our treat portfolio, our fun-for-you portfolio, the Pepsi, the Lay's, and Doritos, to figure out how to reduce the sugar, how to reduce the fat levels, how to reduce the sodium levels. And while we were doing that, increasing the permissibility of our fun-for-you products, figure out ways to really dial up our good-for-you offerings, the Quaker Oats, the Tropicana, the Naked Juice, figure out how to grow our dairy portfolio. And that's what we've been doing. Whether it's offering more grains, more fruit and vegetable, more protein to our consumers, we are trying to dial up our good-for-you and increase the permissibility of our fun-for-you products. That is the first plank of performance with purpose. And you also heard what Ölgerðarinnar is doing, transitioning to smaller portions, moving to no or low sugar soft drinks, and today they account for half of all sales, or labeling all of its own products with the guideline daily amount so that consumers can be aware of the choices they are making. I believe responsible companies know that they have to do right by consumers and customers because that's the only way to ensure long-term prosperity. So that's the portfolio health. The second thing we worry about incredibly at PepsiCo is environmental health. As a corporate leader and a global company dependent on natural resources, we have a responsibility to address global environmental issues. But our sustainability agenda is in fact integrated into our business, and we believe it actually drives both the environmental agenda but our bottom line also. Let me give you examples. We're cutting down our resource usage, whether it's using less water in our production process or less fuel for our delivery trucks. We are finding ways to protect the planet and our bottom line both at the same time. And our work to improve energy efficiency in our operations has led to an estimated energy cost savings of more than $70 million in 2012 alone. $70 million. We've reduced water usage by more than 20% per unit of production since 2006. Not an easy feat, but we have, the best minds working on these projects. We've reduced the packaging weight of our products, primarily our beverage bottles, by more than 350 million pounds over the last 5 years, and we've exceeded the goals that we've set for ourselves by more than 20%. And what this allowed us to do is be environmentally a much more sustainable company, but it's also allowed us to spend less on packaging materials, so it's helped the bottom line. And we have the largest company-owned fleet of electric delivery trucks in the United States, the largest fleet of electric delivery trucks. And our Frito-Lay trucks have reduced carbon emissions by 5,000 metric tons and saved us millions of dollars of fuel costs. And I look at what we're doing around the world, and I come here to Iceland and hear what Andri and the Ölgerðarinnar team is doing. The process is a completely closed cycle. Excess barley becomes pig feed. Surplus heat is used to melt snow in parking lots. Carbon dioxide from the fermentation process is used to make carbonated drinks rather than being released into the atmosphere. And I think this is another example that demonstrates what I said about the vital importance of responsible behavior to a business's success. Consider that in just 19 trucks of the Ölgerðarinnar distribution fleet, even as sales increased, the company reduced the distance driven by 40,000 kilometers, and that's the circumference of the earth. That saves money on fuel, it saves wear and tear on the equipment, and it saves emissions from entering the atmosphere. I believe, as Ölgerðarinnar does, responsible companies ought to see the value in reducing resource use and incidentally saving money in the process. That's the second part of our performance with purpose. The third part, in any conversation about resources, we need to recognize that the most important resources are our employees and our partners. And that's the talent part of performance with purpose. Every bottle filled, every product shipped is the direct result of the hard work of many individuals in our company. With a safe and inclusive workplace, teams are able to make meaningful contributions and reach their highest potential. I think all of us in our respective fields recognize that holding on to the best and brightest is our greatest priority as leaders. And given the low unemployment here in Iceland, your challenge is even greater. For all of us, it's about attracting and retaining talent and creating an environment in which they thrive. You know, recently I've been focusing a lot more of my attention not on buying talent or bouncing talent, you know, getting rid of people that don't work. I think about bonding talent. How do we make sure they're bonded to PepsiCo? And I consider this one of my most important roles as a CEO, and, you know, and the role is giving employees personal ownership for their success of the corporation. And the only way to do it is by leading with head, heart, and hands. You know, typically we've talked about CEOs leading with the head and hands. We have to lead with the emotional dimension, head, heart, and hands. And that's the only way we can get employees to feel personally bonded to the company. I write regular letters to all of the associates of PepsiCo. I tell them what's on my mind. I tell them how I feel when my child goes off to school, college, or to university. Or I might even talk about a business issue. And all my employees, many of them, respond to me by email because I post it on the internal blog. It's great to have that real-time direct connection with me, with them, and them with me. And you know, the most important thing is they don't see me as this out-of-touch CEO. They see me as another person who has the same trials and tribulations that they have on a day-to-day basis. You know, people come to work at our respective companies both to make a living and have a life. When we foster an environment that allows all employees to bring their whole selves to work, we are not just making a better company, we're actually building a family. And I see that in PepsiCo's Performance with Purpose and in Ölgerðarin's 100 initiatives. It's one of the many reasons we are so proud to count Ölgerðarin as one of our very valuable partners. And I believe that creating a culture that bonds employees to it and one that represents what they stand for as individuals will soon be the norm. And more than a norm, it's going to be an imperative among corporations. Now, Iceland, more than any other country, knows that short-term thinking is not sustainable. The effects of the financial crisis were felt first and most severely here. Job losses and a tripling of the unemployment rate is not a nice thing to live through. Liquidation of banks, companies out of business, massive declines in the value of people's pension funds. Economists can argue about the cause for a long time. I think this is one of many examples worldwide of looking at something that was working in the short term and being reticent to ask, can this work in the long term? Is it really sustainable? Whether we learned the lessons from hard history like the financial crisis or have the experience of our shared history of successfully adapting in a changing environment, I believe that all of us have a role to play in promoting human health, environmental health, the growth and well-being of our employees, and the belief that responsible corporations are and must be pillars of a responsible society. It is my hope that 100 years from now, one of my successors and one of your successors, Andre, will stand on this stage to celebrate Ölgerðarin's bicentennial. And as they sip a Pepsi bottled by Ölgerðarin, which I assume will be the only cola available in Iceland, they will look back both at pride on the evolution that you accelerated and on our partnership that was strengthened today. Thank you very much for listening to me.